Welcome to aminacademy.com. Let us do Indian independence movements. Here are some movements that took place during India's freedom struggle. Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In 1919, a peaceful crowd gathered in Amritsar to protest the arrest of pro-independence leader Champaran Satyagraha. In 1917, Mahatma Gandhi led a civil disobedience movement in Bihar. Civil disobedience movement led by Mahatma Gandhi. This movement had two phases: 1921 to 24 and 1930 to 31. Citizens refused to obey British commands without violence. Khilafat movement. In 1919, Indian Muslims protested the British dethronement of the Caliph in Turkey. The Muslim League and Congress worked together during this time. Partition of Bengal. In 1905, the partition of Bengal led to mass protests, boycotts, and demonstrations. Salt March. Mahatma Gandhi led a 241-mile walk to the salt mines in Gujarat. This act of defiance started one of the world's largest civil disobedience movements. Government of Azad Hind. During World War II, Indian National Army INA was formed from the Indian prisoners of war to liberate India from British rule. Ahmedabad mill strike. Textile mill workers in Ahmedabad fought for economic justice after mill owners discontinued their block bonuses. Mahatma Gandhi undertook his first fast unto death on March 15, 1918. Now we'll come to detailed reading. The formation of Indian National Congress. Yet the struggle continued. On December 28, 1885, the Indian National Congress Party was formed, marking the inception of the first major nationalist movement to emerge in the British Empire outside Britain. Led largely by Alan Octavian Hume, a retired British civil servant, sympathetic to the cause of Indian freedom, the Congress Party was initially established as a platform for educated Indians to discuss political issues and advocate for a greater role in governance. The first meeting was held in Bombay, drawing 72 delegates from across the Indian subcontinent. These initial delegates were largely Western educated and from elite backgrounds and focused on moderate reforms rather than outright independence. By the early 20th century, the Indian National Congress began to shift from moderate to more extremist stances under the influence of leaders such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpati Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Annie Besant. The concept of Swadeshi, of our own country, or prioritizing indigenous goods over British imports gained prominence, symbolizing a growing spirit of economic self sufficiency and resistance against imperial exploitation. By 1907, a clear delineation existed between the moderate led by Gopal Krishna Gokhale and the extremist. Formation of All India Muslim League. The All India Muslim League, the first political party of Muslims in India, was founded in Dhaka, now the capital of Bangladesh, on December 30, 1906. This development was driven by the increasing dissatisfaction among Indian Muslims with the Indian National Congress, which many pursued as primarily representing Hindu interests. The party was heavily influenced by the visionary Indian Muslim leader Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who had died in 1898, and was founded by leaders including Mian Muhammad Shafi, Nawab Wakar al Mulk, Nawab Muhsinul Mulk, Sayyid Amir Ali, Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar, and Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, would emerge as a key voice within a few years of the party's founding. The League aimed to safeguard the rights of Indian Muslims and initially espoused loyalty to the British Raj as means to achieve greater civil rights and counterbalance the dominance of the Congress Party. The Muslim League would eventually lay the groundwork for modern Pakistan. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who joined the League in 1913, would later transform the political party into a mass movement for Muslim autonomy. Gandhi's return from South Africa. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, later known as Mahatma, the great soul Gandhi, was born in 1869 in Porbandar, India, and initially trained as a lawyer in England before relocating into South Africa. There he advocated for civil rights and developed his foundational philosophy of non-violent resistance. After spending over 2 decades in South Africa, Gandhi returned to India in 1915 amid the backdrop of World War I and joined the Indian National Congress. Initially, he remained at the periphery of the movement, supporting the British war effort and refraining from political agitation. However, his perspective shifted dramatically followed the enactment of the Rowlatt Act in 1919. Next, a Rowlatt Act or passed. In February 1919, the British government passed the Rowlatt Act, the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, and the Emergence Powers Bill, which empowered authorities to imprison suspected independence activists without trial and allowed for certain political cases to be tried without juries. The object of this act was to replace the repressive provisions of the Wartime Defense of India Act with permanent law. Indians felt profoundly betrayed after their support to Britain throughout World War I, and resentment spread throughout the country. Gandhi, provoked by the act, announced his initial satyagraha, clinging to truth struggle, advocating non-violent civil disobedience, which would lead to a political earthquake throughout the spring of 1919. Jallianwala Bagh massacre. On April 13, 1919, British troops under the command of General Reginald Dyer fired on a crowd of unarmed civilians in Amritsar following Gandhi's calls for resistance and one-day general strike earlier that month. Protests had broken out across the country, particularly in Punjab. In Amritsar, following the arrest of prominent Indian leaders, protests had turned violent on April 10. A force of several dozen troops commanded by General Tyre was tasked with restoring order, and among the measures taken was a ban on public gatherings. On the afternoon, April 13, a crowd of at least 10,000 men, women, and children gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh, a public garden near the Golden Temple, that was nearly completely enclosed by walls and had only one exit. It is not clear how many people there were protesters who were defying the ban on public meetings and how many had come to the city from the surrounding regions to celebrate Baisakhi, a spring festival. Dyer and his soldiers arrived and sealed off the exit without warning. The troops opened fire on the crowd, reportedly shooting hundreds of rounds until they ran out of ammunition. It is not certain how many died in the bloodbath, but according to one official British report, an estimated 379 people were killed and about 1,200 were wounded. After they ceased firing, the troops immediately withdrew, leaving behind the dead and wounded. The shooting was followed by the proclamation of martial law in Punjab that included public flogging and other humiliations. India outrages grew as news of the shooting and subsequent British actions spread throughout the subcontinent. The Bengali poet and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore re-announced the knighthood that he had received in 1915. Gandhi was initially hesitant to act, but soon began organizing the non cooperation movement in 1922-22, his first large scale and sustained non violent protest campaign. Launched in 1920, Gandhi's non-cooperation movement, backed by the Congress Party, was a mass protest against British authority, advocating non-participation in colonial institutions. Indians were encouraged to resign from their titles, boycott government educational institutions, court government services, foreign goods, and elections, and eventually refused to pay taxes. The non cooperation movement rapidly gained momentum amid growing national anger towards the British Raj, particularly in the wake of the Rowlatt Act and the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The heavy handedness of the British government and its failure to adequately address the action of General Tyre only intensified the Indian resolve for self governance. In 1921, the British government, confronted with the United Indian Front for the first time, was visibly shaken. The non cooperation movement had definitively shown the potential of united, non-violent civil disobedience against the colonial regime. Additionally, it marked the transition of Indian nationalism from a middle class movement to a nationwide struggle. Gandhi, at this point, emerged as the de facto leader of both the Indian National Congress and the independence movement itself. The non cooperation movement also drew support from the Khilafat movement, which was mobilizing Muslim protest against the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire after World War I. Gandhi's solidarity with the Khilafat movement helped strengthen Hindu Muslim unity during this phase of independence struggle. However, Gandhi called an end to the non cooperation movement in 1922 after an angry mob in Chauri Chaura killed 22 police officers. Gandhi feared that the movement was becoming violent, contrary to its principles. Gandhi was arrested for sedition that year and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Jawaharlal Nehru, a young leader within the Congress party who would later become India's first prime minister, had been arrested the previous year for anti government activity and released a few months later. Gandhi was released in 1924 after serving only 2 years of his sentence. By the time of his release, the political landscape had changed significantly. The Indian National Congress had split into two factions, one led by Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru, the father of Jawaharlal Nehru, favoring participation in the British dominated Legislative Council as a means to gain political influence, and the other led by Chakravarti Rajagopalachari and Vallabhai Patel, opposing this approach and advocating for more assertive stance against British authority. Additionally, the unity between Hindus and Muslims had deteriorated. In 1924, Gandhi was named president of the Congress Party, a position he held for a year. Declaration of Purna Swaraj. On January 26, 1930, the Indian National Congress publicly declared its Purna Swaraj, complete self rule, resolution, decisively rejecting the idea of dominion status within the British Empire and establishing full sovereignty as the goal of the independence movement. Initially, some leaders within the movement had aimed for dominion status, which would have given in India a position similar to the Canada and Australia within the British Empire. However, as the movement progressed, this idea was increasingly viewed as inadequate by Congress party leaders. The resolution was initially passed by the Congress Party on December 19, 1929, during the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, who at the time was the youngest person to hold that position in the party. The resolution was publicly declared the following month, with the Congress Party urging Indians to celebrate January 26 as Independence Day, although August 15 was later chosen as India's official Independence Day after achieving independence in 1947. The date January 26 remained significant. The Constitution of India was drafted to take effect on January 26, 1950, to honor the 1930 declaration, marking India's transition to a republic. Today, January 26 is celebrated annually as Republic Day in India. The Salt March. In 1930, Gandhi launched the Salt March, popularly known as the Dandi March, a satyagraha campaign against the British monopoly on salt. Salt production and distribution in India had long been a lucrative monopoly of the British. Through their series of laws, the Indian populace was prohibited from the producing salt and selling salt independently. And, and instead, Indians were required to buy expensive, heavily taxed salt that often was imported. This affected the great majority of Indians who were poor and could not afford to buy it. Indian protests against the salt tax began in the 19th century and remained a major contentious issue throughout the period of British rule. Gandhi decided to mount a highly visible demonstration against the increasingly repressive salt tax by marching through what is now the Western Indian state of Gujarat from his ashram to the down to Dandi near Surat on the Arabian Sea coast. He set out the foot on March 12, accompanied by several dozen followers. After each day's march, the group stopped in a village along the route where increasingly larger crowd would gather to hear Gandhi speak about the unfairness of tax on poor people. Hundreds more would join the core group of followers as they made their way to the sea, until on April 5, the entourage reached Dundee after a journey of some 240 miles, nearly 385 kilometers. On the morning of April 6, Gandhi and his followers picked up a handful of salt along the shore, thus technically producing salt and breaking the law. Sarojini Naidu was a distinguished figure in India politics and literature, sometimes known as the Nightingale of India. She played a leading role in the Salt March and later became president of the Indian National Congress, becoming the first Indian woman to do so. Her political career culminated in her appointment as the governor of United Provinces, now Uttar Pradesh. She also led an active literary life as poet and attracted notable Indian intellectuals to her famous salon in Bombay. In May, Gandhi was arrested after informing George Mountain Duke, Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India, of his intention to march on the Darasana saltworks. Gandhi's arrest further fueled the movements, prompting tens of thousands more people to join the Satyagraha. On May 21, Sarojini Naidu, a well-known political activist and poet, led a march to the saltwork where many of the 2,500 peaceful marchers were brutally attacked and beaten by police. By the end of 1930, approximately 60,000 people were imprisoned as part of the civil disobedience campaign. In January 1931, Gandhi was released from custody and began negotiations with Irvin, leading to the Gandhi-Irvin Pact, signed on March 5, 1931. This truce ended the Satyagraha campaign and allowed Gandhi, accompanied by Naidu, to represent the Indian National Congress at the second section of the Round Table Conference in London. Later that year, this session, however, failed to reach agreement either on a constitutional framework or on communal representation. So far, we discussed about Indian freedom fight movements. It will continue in next video further. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.